So in this section, what I want to do is a quick walkthrough. Just this is a basic course, and so it's intended to help people who have never worked with Meshmixer. If you're already familiar with Meshmixer and you don't feel like you have anything else to pick up, just skip right on past this and go to the next video. I already said this in the last video, but when you first open Meshmixer, you have these options right here, okay? I'm going to bring that bunny in again. So it's sitting there just so we have an STL file so that all of the different things that I want to show you are working. I'm not going to show you everything. I'm just going to show you the most common things that I use on a day-to-day basis. I've been using Meshmixer for years, and there's things that I just rarely ever touch. And so in this file, probably the notable things is, if you want to save your project and come back and work on it at another time, this is where you use save as or save. Okay, one of these options is going to allow you to save it as a .mix file. That's different than an STL file. You don't hit save right here and then try to 3D print that. If you want to 3D print it, then you come down to where it says export, or over right here where it says export. And in the export one, you want to make sure that you're choosing this option right here for an STL binary format, okay? Unless your 3D printer accepts one of these other ones. Technically, an STL file is a pretty poor system for doing 3D files, but it is kind of the common default one that we use in dentistry. So save it as a binary STL. If you do it with the other STL file, your files are going to be much larger than they need to be. Other than that, I mean, if you want to change your preferences, you certainly can, and I showed you just briefly making a minor change to that, but that's where the preferences are. Other than that, I don't really use much in this one. In actions, don't really use too many of these other than the keyboard shortcut for undo, okay? And this one I use the most, okay? So under view, recenter at cursor, that is a very useful tool I will discuss later, but I never use it from this menu. This is here to just tell you what the keyboard shortcut is. And I don't often use these ones. Visibility, yes. If you notice right here, if I hold down Control V, that makes my object hidden. Now, because I only have this one object here, you don't notice that it's hidden, but if I go ahead and hide it and then click on another one, notice that it's missing, okay? It's not missing, it's still there. If I say Show Object Browser, you can see that both of these objects are here. It's just one of them is hidden. The object browser is another way that you can hide things. This little icon off to this side, the little eyeball, that allows you to toggle visibility on and off. But notice that if you have an object that is selected but it's hidden, you get this see-through pink color. Okay, and sometimes it's nice to do that on purpose, but if you ever see that color, that's why. All right. The other thing here in the object browser is if you're working with pivots, you can toggle pivots on and on so the pivots show up in this list. Also, if you want to quickly duplicate something, you can go ahead and bring it in here. So as you can see, I've just duplicated that bunny, but we'll talk more about that later. And then the last thing is if you want an easy way to delete an STL file from the scene, you can click on the little trash can right there. Okay, and so there we go, and then close that out. So other things in view, like let's say that I had that that second file in there, okay, but I made it so I can't see it. If I ever want to say show all, it just makes everything visible again. But then this one here is useful, showing the wireframe. You can see the wireframe, the keyboard shortcut is W. So if I type W, you can turn the wireframe on and off. Showing the boundaries is talking about this little blue line that is outlining that open boundary. If I uncheck that, notice the blue line goes away. So if you don't want to see it, that's how you turn it off. Grid is the thing that I showed you in the last video. Often when I'm working, I don't like having the grid on unless I need a reference. And so if I need a reference, I'll show the grid. I don't often ever need to show my printer bed, so I always leave that off. And then the other thing that is useful is this orthographic view. Let me, by default, normally you have it in this perspective view. And in perspective view, basically, things that are closer to you are bigger. And as they get further away from you, they get smaller. But what that does is it distorts the view. And for that reason, I just don't like it. It's not too big a deal when you're working with an object like this. But when you're in dentistry and you're working on teeth, and you've got the teeth and you're looking right at them, but you want to zoom in on something, it starts to really distort how you're looking at those teeth. I just don't like that. More often than not, I work in the orthographic view. Okay, this last one here that's saying transparent target, that one, let me show my object browser. This little magnet thing here is one way that you can take an object and you can set it as a target. And we'll talk more about targets later. Okay, that's not something we need to talk about now, but notice when you turn something into a target, you get a same kind of see-through, but now it's more of a see-through blue color. If you uncheck this, now your target, which is still a target, is no longer see-through. So if that's something you need, then that's something you can do. So that's that view. I don't do too much in here. There are some good tools though, like keyboard shortcuts. If you need to learn some of the common shortcuts, they're sitting right there. And then also going to Meshmixer.com, they have a forum. They also have manuals. Let me go and show you that real quick on their website. So this is where if I don't know something, this is my go-to. I come here and it's actually trying to go to, here we go, we got it. All right. So this is the manual that I was talking about, and you can see that if you come through here and you want to, for example, let's say you want to learn a little bit more about the offset tool. So you can come here, and the offset tool, it gives you some really nice documentation, sometimes with examples, and so it's a very, very nice tool that you have to answer questions. Okay, and like I said, this is my go-to when I have a question, I want to look something up. So let's go back over into Meshmixer, and if you run into a bug or you have a problem, you can click here to report that. So that's kind of a walkthrough over these menu options here at the top. To go down these ones on the side, we're not going to get into the details because that comes in later videos. We already talked about importing. If you want to bring in an STL file, you click on here, you find it on your system, and it brings it in. Meshmix is what we already talked about. To use Meshmix, you have to have an object selected, but that just brings these different options up. Okay. I told you I would show you the difference between these different ones. So let me go into the teeth, and I'll show you the difference between these two. Okay, so notice right here how these are the same teeth, but this one has like an ovate Pontic design, and then this one is open-ended. I used to always use these, but then I realized that I never needed a tooth to be open-ended like that, and that's when I stopped. And so now when I put it on the installation here just to show you, but normally just to make things load faster, I take out the things I never use, and that's something I never use. So I would actually go in and delete that. In fact, if you want to know how to do that, you can come in, not this one, but the other one. So if you look right here, that's this folder right here showing the teeth. I would just delete that completely. It's not going to show up deleted until you close the program and open it up again, but that is going to save your load time when the software is opening up. At least, makes these more accessible. You can still use the software while these are loading in there. But, primitive shapes, I use these all the time, like a square or something to bring it in. And we'll talk more about how to manipulate objects later on. Okay. All right. So select is, let me choose the bunny here. And again, I'm not going to go into all the ins and outs of these, but selecting is how you select something. Okay, there's different ways that you can select things. and we'll talk more about that later, but to be able to select a part of an object, you'll notice there's two different ways that I say select when working in Meshmixer. Notice when I click on each of these STL files, they lighten up. Okay, lightening up makes that object the active or selected object. But once you have an object selected and you use the select tool, now you're selecting certain triangles in that object. And I'm going to talk more about triangles in the next video. Sculpting is, and we'll talk more about all these different options later on. Sculpting is the closest thing you have to making it so that you're working with your object like it's clay, where you can kind of push into it, pull away from it, expand it, shrink it, smooth it out, all those different things. In dentistry, you could say it's like waxing up. So for example, if I come up to this little guy here and I can, you know, pull out those triangles and kind of give a different look. I can also change the size of my brush here, hold down well, maybe that's too small. Let's see. And then hold down Control, which kind of reverses that same tool. And you can sculpt things. You can sit here and play around with the different looks of things. You can also come in, this is probably one of the more common ones, is to smooth out something. Okay, and depending on what you're doing, what project you're working on, it will determine which of these that you're going to use, but we'll talk more about those later. Stamping is a way that you have to, let's see here. I don't use this very much. There we go. So you can kind of see right here where it's selecting this area right here, okay, kind of creates something that if you want to create a particular shape, you can see that I use that stamp tool. These different colors you're seeing here are called face groups, okay, and I'm just kind of messing around a little bit with it, but you can see what I mean, how those stamps allow you to select a specific area and then do something with it. Edit is a very popular list. We're not going to go through any of these because these are going to be a whole video in and of themselves where we'll go through each of these things and I'll show you which ones I use and show you some ins and outs of each. Analysis has a lot of useful tools, but most people just use the inspector. The inspector, we'll talk more about this later, but that's how you take a hole like this and you close it. So you can see why that's a popular one. I don't use too many of these, but I do at times use the measurements. Shaders are a way to change the way that you're viewing these things. One of the ones that I use is this one here that will make your object see-through. And so if I want an object to be see-through, I can drag this see-through shader on. This one right here is meant to be for like a 3D printer. Remember, this is the print bed, and this is showing me where some unsupported areas are. Okay, I don't use these things very much at all. Okay, I normally leave it on this one. And if it's not on that one, it's because I'm making it see-through like this. And then if you drag it onto the scene, everything changes to that. If you drag it onto an object, it changes just how that one object is rendering. And you can see that there's different ones that are possible, but the default is this one right here. So if you want to get back to the beginning. Oh, that's not really, why is it not doing it? So anyway, that's what those shaders are. Export is if I take this bunny and I want to go ahead and put it out there to the 3D printer, and then this one at the bottom says print. I never use that. So I hope that gives you kind of a general overview. Oh, one last thing I want to show you is this box up here. So this is one nice way where you can kind of change the different views that you see, okay? And so like this is quite useful, especially if you have things aligned to your grid, and I'll show you how I align models to the grid, especially if you're going to do like a wax up here. But let's say you're right here and you want this to be your front. You can change that. You can say set current view as front. If you have a view and you want that to be your home view, you can set it at home. What that means is if you click on this, it goes to that spot. So if you have like things aligned because you're doing like a wax up and you have it aligned so that it looks like the patient's looking right at you, and you want to get back to that view after you've moved some things around, you can set that as your home. And you can also change your perspective versus orthographic right there. And so that's just some of the, and that hasn't always been there. It's nice that they added something like that so you can see it. So I hope that's helpful, just to kind of get a general overview of Meshmixer. And what I want to do in the next videos is I want to start going through these different options. We'll start right here with select, because once you select something, suddenly there's a ton of different options, and I want to start going through those so you can better understand those. Before I get into that, in the very next video, I want to talk about what kind of the basics of digital dentistry, and I have some slides from a presentation I made a while back and I want to show you. But those basics of digital dentistry are key. It's critical for you to think about these objects in a different way. In a nutshell, you want to start thinking about STL files as triangles. Okay, the more you can think of them as triangles and not a model of teeth, the better it is going to be for you to better understand the different tools that Meshmixer has. And if you think of everything as a triangle and you think about the tools and what the tools are doing to the triangles, it helps to better understand what tool you should be using, and when something doesn't work, it helps you understand why. So hopefully that's helpful, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks.